But we should in general see it as a good thing that people want to come to the United States of America and still see it as the land of opportunity.
You should see it as a land of opportunity. It should be. It should be a land of opportunity for people who live here and people who are natural-born U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents.
But that's the thing is like you see this as a zero-sum game, and it's not. It's not.
Like I said, there's a lot of data to back it up. Now,
the idea that immigration is a zero-sum game is factually incorrect no matter what. There's no getting around that. You might as well argue that the sun, the sky is green or what. Like you're arguing against the cosmos. You rage against the sun because it rises in the east and not as you claim from the south. You are delusional if you think that economics is a zero-sum game. Somebody linked me this. Krystal and Saagar go to war over border crisis bill. I'm actually intensely interested. No voices until I say so. Thank you. Noticing at first glance that this video is 50 minutes long. That's crazy. 50 minutes. Now, why is that? It's an awfully long time, I feel. Krystal's comparison between internal migration versus external migration is so stupid it hurts. So Krystal is actually going to be pro-immigration, right? She should be. I mean, that makes sense. Vaush going to listen to it all. How about we listen to just a little bit to begin with? How about we get a little feel for it? Dip our little toesies in?
In Washington, the border bill arrived and seemingly died upon arrival. It was
the bill that's being referred to here is the one that Biden proposed that was super duper right wing. You know, that Trump immediately kicked down.
Negotiated by Senator James Lankford, Senator Kyrsten Sinema, and some
Senator
Chris Murphy as well from the Democratic side. Kyrsten Sinema.
It starts from 2408. Oh, you're saying they don't start with the debate; they start with the just coverage. Okay, gotcha.
And you don't deport them. That basically is amnesty because when the hell are they going to leave? I mean, that's kind of the.
But here's the thing, just on a substantive level, that I genuinely don't understand, and I want to hear your analysis of. Republicans, we've covered this on the show a bunch of times. Talk about, you know, all these people who are leaving New York, going to Texas, going to Florida. And that's seen as like that internal migration is seen as like, I think justifiably so, terrible for New York and terrible for California and fantastic for Texas and fantastic for Florida. But suddenly when it's people who are coming from outside the country, even though they're also just human beings, and by the way, immigrants, like some of the clearly like hardest working and oftentimes most patriotic people you could possibly meet.
This is so true, man. Having grown up in Los Angeles, the backbone of Los Angeles is all of the goddamn even undocumented Mexican immigrants. They are like the actual pillars. You know that meme of like a bunch of dying soldiers holding up the grass that you walk on as an American citizen or something? It's like that, except with Mexican undocumented immigrants.
Suddenly when they're coming from out of the country, when they come to New York, it's like, oh my God, this is terrible for New York. So how is it that people leaving is bad, but also people coming is bad?
It's a philosophical difference, Krystal, which is that the first part, your people are lawful permanent residents in their.
So, but what he means is it's a racial difference.
American citizens, and the people who are coming here are not, and in most cases,
they could be.
Maybe, but you know they don't pay taxes.
If they're allowed,
most of them don't speak English.
But that would be an argument for a pathway to citizenship, to legalizing them, bringing them out of the shadows. Because the problem, and this is one of the arguments about like, oh, it depresses the wages. What depresses wages is when you have people.
They do pay taxes, by the way. If you're an undocumented immigrant, you pay taxes, you pay sales tax. There are lots of taxes that you pay just by virtue of you. Like, you contribute to the system more than you take. There are plenty of tax benefits you don't get back from the government either, you know?
Who are not legalized, who are in the shadows, who are being paid under the table, oftentimes like less than minimum wage and not having to abide by labor regulations. What you're making is an argument for legalizing immigrants, for allowing in more legal immigrants versus having this massive shadow economy.
I actually don't support legalizing immigrants, and I don't support pathway to citizenship for the vast majority of people here. And I'll tell you why, which is that as fundamentally is a fairness issue. People like my parents spent years and tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers.
When I was your age, I had cancer, and I just had to deal with it. But now there's a cure for cancer? That's, wow. Well, you don't deserve it. I didn't get a cure for cancer. Yeah.
trying to get visas. They had PhDs and master's degrees. It's not that easy for people to get a visa to this country. You can ask anybody who's like me. I think it's bullshit, frankly, that you can just cross the border, just say, I fear for my life because El Salvador sucks, and you get to stay here. And you get to work for 5-10 years, liably never leave. The other case, and this is, look.
Why? Like, is it just spite then? Like, I know that for Saagar, the answer is racial. It's a racial thing. But, like, dealing with the pretend arguments, what is, like, notice how strong of opinions that people have on stuff like this, but when you give them any kind of, like, answers, or if you ask them for any, like, specific answers and why they feel that way, they're like, well, I don't know, it's just not, like, fair, I don't know. Like, it's, yeah. There was a new study about immigrants being unbelievably good for the economy. This? I think you linked the wrong thing, Quoteth. But we have studies that we've looked at before. Immigrants absolutely are to the benefit of this country. Everyone is enriched by them, including native citizens.
You can call me racist if you want. The vast majority of people arriving here have no skills. We're lucky if they have a 5th grade reading level.
I don't like Saagar myself, but are you sure he's saying it for racial reasons? Yeah, yes. Saagar is absolutely a fascist. Like, I've been watching him talk for years now. His policies are consistently in line with those of racists every time I see him talk about anything racists care about. Again, this is one of the ways you can tell, by the way. If a person wasn't racist, why would they have such a strong opinion against something that data indicates benefits us? What possible emotional biases could lead a person to be vehemently opposed to something that we know is to our benefit? People will get incredibly hardline when it comes to, like, you know, we shouldn't be letting these people in. And then when you ask for specific reasons, they back off. And it's like, well, why? You know, I mean, we'll hear his explanations, I guess. Maybe my mind will be changed.
Spanish, let alone in English. They're not educated in terms of the jobs that they're going to take. I mean, is it really fair to depress, like, wages for the lower class Americans?
It doesn't. Yeah, again, like, if you pretend to care about this, why say things that are objectively wrong? It doesn't, you know? And we need low-skill workers in America as well. We need agricultural workers. We need people who are doing landscaping. We need people who are working across every sector. Like, the implication that we only need workers in sectors that involve, like, you know, that require PhDs is ridiculous. We need people working at every level. I'm not saying that we should exploit undocumented immigrants for their cheaper labor. I think they should be paid the same as anyone else, you know, but we still need workers operating in those fields.
No, but absolutely.
The research.
It's a supply and demand issue. It's basic.
It's your assumption is that there's some set number of jobs in the economy and that's it. End of story. It doesn't shift. So
Due largely to an unexpected surge in immigration, the U.S. economy will be about $7 trillion larger and federal revenues about $1 trillion bigger than the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said Wednesday. The impact is over 10 years, to be clear. It does not take into account any legislation that Congress may or may not approve. Labor force in 2033 is larger by 5.2 million people, mostly because of higher net immigration. GDP will be greater by about 7 trillion. Revenue will be greater by about 1 trillion. It's just good to have more people here, you know?
Again, it comes back to, okay, then why is it a great thing for New Yorkers to be moving to Texas? Why is that great for Texas? Why isn't that them taking their jobs and depressing their wages and ruining their community, et cetera?
Many people in my home state of Texas would say it's ruining their community, and it is driving.
Oh, okay. Then why aren't we opposed to it?
Prices up because of the supply.
Yeah, but they brag about, all the moving vans coming here to Florida and to Texas. Look. But when it's you know, American citizens coming from New York, then it's amazing and it's great for the economy, et cetera, et cetera. But somehow, even though it's just also people, they just happen to be coming from outside the country, then suddenly it's terrible. It doesn't make sense.
I just think there's a fundamental difference between a guy who makes $250,000 from New York and moves to Austin, who's paying taxes and can buy a house, than somebody who comes here with literally $0.
I think that's so.
What about poor people who move to Florida? So so again, notice the incoherence. If Saagar's arguments here were consistent, he would say, yes, we also shouldn't have poor people moving to Florida. We don't want poor people there. Now, if you understand how the economy works at even like a basic elementary level, you understand you can't have a state that consists entirely of people who make $250,000 a year, right? You can't, like, Florida right now is having labor issues because they've been pushing immigrants and undocumented immigrants out of their fields, and as a consequence, they're having a job shortage, or not a job shortage, they're having a labor shortage that they're trying to fill up by pushing more kids to work. Like, remember, there was that Florida bill that was trying to expand the length of time during which children could work in given jobs when they should be getting a good education. Forcing children to work jobs when they should be focusing on schools also detracts from the local standard of education because you're splitting their attention. This argument is completely incoherent. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Classist. Because
no, it's not classist. They're not. First of all, they're not from here, so they don't deserve anything.
Case example of why neoliberals are some of the dumbest idiots in human history. Well, no, neoliberals would be on the right side of this. Neoliberals like immigration because it's economically beneficial. Saagar is not a neoliberal. He's a fascist.
Yeah.
Because
no, it's not classist. They're not. First of all, they're not from here, so they don't deserve anything.
Great argument, by the way. Excellent high Q argument. Thank you for your logical argument on why it's bad for immigrants to come into the country. Well, they're not from here. They don't deserve. Thank you. Extremely rational. Super rational.
Yeah. Think about, but put aside who deserves what, et cetera, et cetera. Just think about the best interest of the country. Like, it's very clear that some level of immigration, and you can see it again when we're talking about internal migration, is very good for local economies. And you know what? What we have seen as a nation of immigrants is that in these subsequent waves of immigration, some of the hardest working people, most family-oriented people, et cetera,
absolutely,
and more law-abiding, by the way, are immigrants.
Depends on the type, but yes.
Depends on the type. On the type. No, immigrants on average commit fewer crimes than non-immigrants.
Not true. If you look overall, immigrant populations more law-abiding than native-born citizens, not to mention, yes, when they first come and they're learning the language and they're new, et cetera, and they're bringing their cultures, we all know what the next generation looks like. They just look like Americans. Their kids are going to speak English. They're going to be 100% American.
Well, by the way, Saagar's parents are immigrants. Dude, if you've been in this country if your family has been in this country for more than like a century or so, all of us just waffled in here. You know that, right? Like, the modern conception of borders in a nation, that's modern. For most of America's history, the way you became a citizen of a nation was by, like, taking a boat here, and then you're here. They didn't do strict background checks back then. How could they? Background checks in 1924? And if you go back even further than that, past the point you just showed up. If you took a boat over and you landed here and you walked onto the soil, congrats. Thus begins your new life in America, you know? Go back far enough and like literally everyone adhered to no standards in arriving here. And that was one of the things that allowed our country to grow as rapidly as it did. My ancestors just bought a boat ticket and showed up. Yeah. It took a while for them to even start passing laws on banning people, and it was because they were Chinese. Listen to this. Just so you guys understand what our country was built on, okay? The 1790 Naturalization Act, back in 1790, establishes the country's first uniform rule for naturalization. The law provides that free white persons who have resided in the U.S. for at least 2 years may be granted citizenship so long as they demonstrate good moral character and swear allegiance to the Constitution. So, apart from criteria that involve slavery and just explicit racial discrimination, what you have to do is live here for a bit and be of good moral character and swear allegiance to the Constitution. Okay. 1798, the Alien and Sedition Acts contain a number of stringent immigration enforcement provisions. Among other provisions, the laws require that non-citizens have resided in the U.S. for 14 years prior to naturalization, authorize the president to apprehend, restrain, or remove non-citizens who are citizens or subjects of countries with which the U.S. is at war, and allow the executive branch to deport any non-citizen deemed dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States. Notice how nothing here is saying you can't enter the country. It's just talking about becoming a citizen. That's it. If you just wanted to enter the country, you could. The only thing here that it mentions about removing you if you enter the country is if you are dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States or a citizen or subject of a country with which the United States is at war. Then we skip ahead 70 years to the Immigration Act of 1864, established the position of Commissioner of Immigration who reports to Secretary of State. 1882, the Immigration Act of 1882 constituting one of the first attempts at broad federal oversight of immigration. The law levies a tax of 50 cents for each passenger arriving by ship from a foreign port who is not a U.S. citizen to be paid by the ship's owner. The proceeds are deposited into a fund in the U.S. Treasury called the Immigration Fund, which the Treasury Secretary is authorized to use to defray expenses incurred in regulating immigration. The law further establishes that the U.S. will screen arriving passengers, and anyone deemed, quote, a convict, lunatic, idiot, or person unable to take care of himself or herself without becoming a public charge shall not be allowed to land. So all the way back in 1882, the only restrictions were, one, the captain of your ship had to give 50 cents over, which was probably like, I don't know, $100. And two, you couldn't be a VGGer. And as long as you fulfilled those two requirements, you could just walk on in. Then you had the Chinese Exclusion Act. Chinese, and gets more complicated the further on you go. The only point here that I'm making is that for a significant portion of American history, you could kind of just waddle on into the United States,
Well, it depends. Look, George Borjas, who works over at Harvard University, has done a 2017 fantastic study which shows that mass illegal immigration largely depresses wages for lower class Americans. So that's number one. I would say the
What? No, wait, that's a lie. Isn't that the thing in my document? Or is that a different study? Am I thinking of a different study? Oh, I think I'm thinking of a different study. This is the study where they say that immigration from the 1980s to 2000 is what led to a decrease in relative wages rather than, I don't know, Reagan destroying unions. No. I remember this. This was dog shit. They were basically, the argument was basically like, the perfect correlation between between wages decreasing and union membership decreasing explained by Reagan-era policies. Actually, it's because of immigration. We have studies on this. Illegal immigration does not depress wages for any Native American citizens over a longer period of time. And in the very, very short term, the only group it even slightly depresses wages for is Native workers who don't have a high school degree. But it's broadly beneficial to the economy, and even those Native workers who don't have a high school degree eventually do benefit.
Empirical data is pretty set on this in terms of the laws of supply and demand. But number two, again, is a deep philosophical difference. I think that the net migration level that we should have over the next 30 years should be zero. And this is my case again,
like if you actually gave a about America, this is psychotic. Any assessment of our nation, population matrices, and the economy makes it incredibly clear that net zero immigration would be disastrous for our economy. It would be unbelievably bad, insanely bad. The only reason a person would believe this is just racial animus. That's it. That's the only reason. There is no economic assessment. There is no evaluation of the data that would lead one to fairly believe that we should benefit from net zero immigration. Borjas was the primary advisor to Jason Richwine, whose Harvard dissertation concluded that Latino immigrants to the U.S. are and will remain less intelligent than native whites. Yeah, that sounds about right. Borjas later said he did not find the IQ academic work all that interesting, i.e., let's keep the racism, implicit. Thank you.
Look, people will be like, how can a guy, son of Indian immigrants? By the way, my mom vehemently disagrees with me if anybody wants to know. And she also votes, so she can vote the way that she wants if people want to know. I'll tell you, which is that in the 1919s and the teens, we had a hyphenated American crisis, very similar to the one that we have here. Mass internal strife.
Vaush, while I agree that most immigration laws were put in place due to racism, you need to have an answer for when people bring up addition of things like income tax and social programs that didn't exist when people could just walk in. Yeah, but we already have data for that. First of all, undocumented immigrants don't benefit from Social Security or social programs. I guess they can walk into the ER if they need to, but we have data on this. The undocumented immigrants are disproportionately beneficial because they do pay into the system and benefit the economy, but they don't benefit in a lot of the ways that citizens do, or even people who are legitimately here, green card holders or whatever. And what's more, as for income tax, a lot of undocumented immigrants don't receive income tax, to be sure, but they also don't benefit from other stuff. There's data on the overall outcome of stuff like this, and it just doesn't work. They are a benefit to the economy.
Complete differences of opinion. People speak in German, people speak in Italian. They had dual loyalty to their old countries, as we saw during the First World War. It was a huge problem. We had a massive foreign-born population.
What is this century-old racism? Ah, yes, the Germans and the Polacks were corrupting the blood of the nation with their What dual loyalty? What are we talking about here? The country was fine. We made it. That's an actual lie. Yeah, just like what an esoteric thing to like make up. Like, yeah, back in World War I, our country was driven apart by all the immigrants. Like, hold on. Immigration to USA by year as percentage of population. Immigrants comprise 13.6% of the total US population in 2021. A slight decrease from the 13.7% they comprised in 2019 and short of the record high of 14.8% back in 1890. I don't know, it seems fine to me. There was no dual loyalty. He's literally repeating anti-German American hysterics from the time. Yeah, it's like ancient racism. How racist do you have to be to start going on like the Germanic menace and the corruption of the, you know, Angloid blood? Immigrants as percentage of the US population from 1860 and onward. See? The blue line is the total number of immigrants, which has obviously gone up because the total number of people in the country have gone up. But as a percentage of the US population, like we are now where we were through here? Did America fall apart in 1890? I don't know.
Equivalent only to today. Internal strife was solved one way. We dramatically lowered the level of immigration. We let people assimilate into the country. And for the next 40 to 50 years, we had very, very little immigration. Now, that is my case for us becoming a cohesive nation, which can have a
racially cohesive. Again, like, it's such an un-American talking point, too. Like, you've completely abandoned any pretense of a nation of immigrants or, like, a melting pot. It's like, this is literally just Nazi shit. Like, hey, I know what will reduce conflict. Ethno-nationalism.
True national identity, and one where the foreign-born population, where it is currently at an all-time high, should not continue to be higher with a orderly process. I will also say many Indians will be pissed off at what I'm saying because I'm also claiming that legal immigration should go to net zero. And I strongly believe it because I do believe that our current sovereignty and internal politics is so divisive largely because—
Gosh, this is a really bad take. Italians have a known criminal brow line and the brain case of an adulterer. Everyone knows this. That's true. That's true. Listen, I'm asking you guys to look past the empirics of the situation. I'm calling upon your heart, okay?
We do not relate to one another whatsoever. And
that really has nothing to do with immigration.
What?
Do believe that our current sovereignty and internal politics is so divisive largely because we do not relate to one another whatsoever. And
that really has nothing to do with immigration.
The third world is just not going to work.
Even if you look—
Remember earlier when someone asked, like, whether or not he was racist? It's just like, again, none of these arguments make sense if you're not a racist, like, at all. The arguments about a lack of cohesion, for example, the big divide right now politically in America is between urban and rural populations, not between different races. That's not like that's not as much of a descriptor, you know, in terms of like broad cultural affiliation. That's not really how it works. So he's talking about something that would nuke our economy. But again, every economist agrees on this. You will not find an economist who believes that a net zero immigration plan would be anything other than ruinous for America's economy. Like, you will not find those people. So the only reason you would believe this random, incoherent gibberish, this like, the blood of the nation, national coherence, what?
Look at like the political divide has never been actually less racially polarized than it is right now.
Sure.
And in fact, Republicans are winning. This is the other thing with all this like great replacement. Oh, they want to bring in all these immigrants just so they can vote for Democrats. Like, that's actually happening less and less. And Republicans love to brag about how they're winning over this population, but also fearmonger about how they could never win this population. So that's another part of the conversation that I think makes absolutely no sense and is utterly ridiculous. The divide in this country, yeah, some are, you know, there are some racial divisions, but
I actually think that Krystal is handing him down, by the way. Krystal's doing a great job. Not only has she been making good points, but she's also been delivering them in exactly the way that she should, you know, like calm, coherent. I think she's cooking a little bit, you know. I think she's got a big, you know, she's got the big American mixing pot right in front, you know.
Increasingly, we're actually less polarized among racial lines. And, you know, I would wager, and I think most people would agree, that ultimately the country was much better for those waves of Irish and Italian and Polish and German immigrants. I mean, that's part of what has made this country what it is.
Yeah, obviously, the founding stock of this country was tiny. We needed immigrants or the country would have grown incredibly slowly. The immigration was also a sign of our nation's strength. You guys realize a very high immigration rate is seen as a good thing, right? It means your country is desirable. That's a good thing. It means you have more people to work. It means you have more people to contribute. It means that your country is doing well enough that they can afford to bring in more people, like that we have the infrastructure to benefit from additional labor, and it shows our country is doing well enough that people want to be here. Like, these are all desirable elements. Countries that have low immigration rates desperately want to increase those immigration rates. Like, it's seen as a bad thing to not have immigration. Yeah, look at fucking Japan, dude. Look at Japan. Jesus Christ. That country is dying because they keep insistently, even though they've been laying off it a little bit lately because they need to, prevent immigrants from coming in, you know?
And I don't see this new wave of migrants coming from a different part of the world in any different way. So listen, is there a limit to how much we can, bring in at one time? Just again, practically, if you flood the zone with a whole bunch of new people and that creates housing, there's problems. I'm not going to say that there's
also,
you can just bring in the whole.
They become part of the essential fabric of the nation. Right now, guys, our mental understanding of New Jersey, of New York, of areas like that are inseparable from the presence of Italian people. Like, literally, the New York City, one of the mega cities of the world, one of the prides, the gems of the United States, is conceptually heavily associated with Italian people because of their presence there, Texas, as much as they fucking hate Mexicans on like a state policy level, Texan culture is heavily derived from, well, that was Mexico, guys. They fought a whole war over it. There's so much in Texas that is the entire like cowboy aesthetic. Like, thank you, Mexico. This whole America is built off of the people in America. And if immigrants are part of the people in America, they are part of the people building America. And it always has been that way. And it's like that in every country on earth.
Whole world, and it's not going to cause an issue. But I do think that there's something fundamentally broken in a logic that would say, it's very clear when a place like the industrial Midwest empties out and these towns are decaying and people are fleeing. It's very clear that's a bad thing. It's very clear when it's New York and people are leaving New York that that's a bad thing. But then somehow, when it's other people who are coming in, which in a different scenario, if they, came from a different country, a different part of the world, you say, this is great, this is wonderful. Somehow that's terrible. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think that the studies back up. The studies show that if you have a massive undocumented illegal workforce, that can be a problem for wages. Actually,
there are. That is to be true, by the way. I don't advocate for mass undocumented immigration because I want them to be documented, The solution to that policy problem is to make documentation easier so that you don't have so many undocumented, people coming in. By the way, just as a reminder to you guys, America is like land given by God. America is so fertile and so large. Look at a population map of the United States. All the dark green areas here have fewer than one person per square mile on average. The lighter green, even slightly lighter, 1 to 10. The massive majority of our, let me see if I can find something comparable, like an older country. That's all mountainous region. A lot of this is uninhabitable, like portions of Nevada and like the Colorado, the Rockies, the Rockies. But a lot of it is perfectly habitable. Let me show you a comparison. 1 second. It's really easy to tell when you compare us to another nation in, say, Europe. Here's a population density map in France. You'll notice that while there is plenty of room in France that isn't occupied, the population density, it's a lot higher. Way, way, way higher. I know that these two maps don't use the same keys. I'm not saying that they're exactly identical or line up, but this is indicative, if nothing else, of the fact that this is a pretty unique deal right over here, right? It's very, very clearly there's room for people. Now pull up the terrain map. Again, I know that a lot of this area isn't difficult to settle, but that doesn't mean all of it is. Like, there's also area in France that's uninhabitable. We have room.
Actually documented immigrants, the overwhelming majority of studies show it's actually good for, it's neutral on wages, and in general is good for the economy and helps for the like thriving of that local area. So that's why
it's slightly positive actually on wages, because keep in mind, immigrants don't just increase the demand for jobs, they increase the supply, because immigrants are now people in your country who are buying things and spending money. So there is now more, there's more mouths to feed, so to speak, and therefore more demand for jobs. It balances itself out. If just increasing the number of workers strangled out jobs, the same would be the case for natural born births. If that was really the argument, like, oh, wow, more people coming in will take our jobs, there won't be enough jobs, the same could be said of having more children then.
You know, again, I'm not like open borders, just, you know, let's have an unlimited number. But I think we can handle a lot more than we have. I think it'd be good for all kinds of people, all kinds of parts of the country. And I also just think it's fundamentally like goes against some core American values, this complete attack on the asylum process and this idea that we don't care if you're being persecuted. We don't care if you fear for your lives. You know, we don't care if you're like, you know, a Jew trying to escape Nazi Germany or whatever.
Well, that's not fair.
It is. If you're ending the asylum process, it is.
These people are not fleeing Holocaust.
Yeah, but
okay?
no, but some people, no.
They're fleeing gang violence.
Yeah,
by the way.
But hold on. Okay. But if you
fear for your life, you fear for your life. That's the asylum process.
end the asylum process, you are telling people who would potentially be fleeing a Holocaust, like, we don't care. That's too bad. We're full.
What we could say is if there's a future Holocaust, then sure, we on a case-by-case basis, we can evaluate what's going to happen. And again, I would even say is that okay, El Salvador. Let's currently
go waiting for the Holocaust to Electric Boogaloo, and we're keeping 6 million people there waiting at the docks while we do like a 1-year process through every person trying to come in. The U.S. did turn away Jews fleeing the Holocaust. Yes, we did.
look, everyone likes to talk about root causes. Well, what just happened? We just had a mass election of a right-wing authoritarian president who threw all the criminals in jail and dramatically lowered their murder rate. That
Okay. In El Salvador, right? Okay.
proves they are adults with agency. They can elect leaders who want to deal with their problems and deal with their own problems. And
guys, is your area being terrorized by gang violence? Is your life under threat? Have you considered simply voting away the corruption in gangs? Hey, did you know that it's theoretically possible to arrest gang leaders? Haha. So like, this would unironically be like this would be like arguing that the Jews are at your docks, the Holocaust is happening, and you're like, I'm pretty sure in the past people have done coups of leaders. Like, you could just do a coup of Hitler. Why didn't you do that? Like, you're an adult, sort out your own problems. It's just total non-argument. Saagar is really just a POS, isn't he? Well, yeah.
And stay where they are. El Salvador's problems are El Salvador's. Venezuela's problems are Venezuela's. Has it been exacerbated by U.S. sanctions? Sure. But at the end of the day, it's not our problem. It's not our...
Wait, what? Hey, have the problems there been exacerbated by our behavior? Sure, maybe, yeah. But who cares? Oh, great, phenomenal fucking argument. Excellent, just fantastic. Did we do it? Yeah, I mean, to an extent, sure. But, you know, not our problem. It is, actually. That is the definition of it being your problem, I think.
Fault that your country, if your country sucks, it's your responsibility to fix it.
Jewish problems are Jewish problems, Saagar in the 1940s. Yeah, I like how he was like, that's not fair. Don't say I wouldn't provide, shelter for Holocaust victims. And then he goes on to give all of the arguments that people gave when turning away the Jews.
But see, I just look at this totally different. I mean, first of all, like, you know, we can't exempt ourselves from the foreign policy that we up till very recently were, screwing over these countries, or the drug war that is one of the, most critical root causes in making many of these places incredibly violent. But even if you put that aside, like I said, like, I don't see this as like a punishment. I think if you look at it through another lens of, typically it's a great thing when people want to move to a place. When they want to move to Florida, somehow it's a great thing. When they want to move to Texas, somehow it's a great thing. So I don't see this as like, oh, we're being punished by having to clean up other people's...
He's doing a line on the other... just outside of camera frame.
messes. No, I think we should have a process that's orderly. I think we should have enough resources to be able to deal with the number of people that are coming. I think we should have an ability, a system that makes sense, that lets in a certain number, that's not going to overwhelm the entire country. But we should in general see it as a good thing that people want to come to the United States of America and still see it as the land of opportunity.
You should see it as a land of opportunity. It should be. It should be a land of opportunity for people who live here and people who are natural born U.S. citizens or who are lawful permanent residents.
But that's the thing is you see this as a zero-sum game, and it's not. It's not.
Like I said, there's a lot of data to back it up. Now,
the idea that immigration is a zero-sum game is factually incorrect. No matter what, there's no getting around that. You might as well argue that the sun, the sky is green or what. Like you're arguing against the cosmos. You rage against the sun because it rises in the east and not, as you claim, from the south. You are delusional if you think that economics is a zero-sum game.
In terms of the difference between the Irish and the German is we were a rapidly industrializing economy which needed cheap labor. I would also say that a lot of people who were natural born hated the Irish and the Germans with some good reason because
and inventing new esoteric forms of fascism by Googling how many racial slurs do you think Saagar knows that stopped being used in the 1800s?
Because they were depleting their wages and were willing to work for much less than they were, and they were driving around their overall wages.
This is one of the reasons why you always have to be critical of these Saagar, Tucker Carlson types who are fake economic populists. New labor does not depress wages. Business owners depress wages. When wages go down, that's not like a magic force that happens as an inevitable product of a new wave of workers having a different skin tone or accent or language. It's because the business owners think they can get away with paying those groups less because those groups are more desperate and subject to racial discrimination. That's it. Otherwise, a sudden population boom, like, say, for example, in the 1950s, would have led to a depressing of wages. Guys, the baby boomers, conceived back in 1945, 46, 47, raised into adulthood through the 1960s and early 70s, did all wages decrease when that population boom suddenly happened? Where were all the wage decreases? Where are they? Where'd they go? No, because having more workers doesn't just decrease wages on its own. The bourgeoisie, the capital class, the bosses, the boss, will take whatever opportunities they can to lower the wages they pay. It is materially incentivized for them to do so. And if they're going to use racism as a pretext for that, they will. Economies grow. That's what they do. Ideally, unless you enforce net zero immigration.
Which led to major labor disputes even within unions at the time. So,
because of racism, because business owners tried to convince white union workers to not ally with non-white potential union workers, because a shared white, non-white union bloc would have been undefeatable. So the only way to break them up was to exacerbate racial tensions between the groups.
That played out 100 years ago, but that was 100 years ago, and we can say what it is. Today, we are not a rapidly industrializing economy or a rapidly deindustrializing economy. We don't need a lot of cheap labor. The predominant...
We absolutely need lots of... Wait. Businesses have been for years now complaining about a lack of workers. What? Wait, this is like front page news economically every day. What the f*** are you talking about? This is like a big deal right now. Businesses are complaining that they're not able to get the work that they need. Like, what do you mean?
An amount of cheap labor that does come here and ends up work in places like home health care space.
Mm-hmm.
They end up depressing wages in places like construction and others. And there's also...
No, they don't. The evidence doesn't back that. Also, we need construction and home health care workers and agriculture workers. undocumented immigrants. What are they even doing? Growing food, taking care of our elderly, building new buildings. What are you going to fill that building with? Mexicans? No, thank you.
Also, we have a housing supply issue. I mean, like, where are these people going to live? But then, look, this is why I don't even like to have an economic argument as much. It's about process and it's about legality.
See, I don't even like to have an economic argument because it's not about economics. All of his economic positions are completely made up and incoherent. It's about race, but he can't just outright say race, so he has to say stuff like, actually, it's about like the philosophy, it's about the principle of the matter, just nonsense, waffly bullshit like that.
If, for example, and you're using the ones about El Salvador, why is it fair that we invaded Iraq and Iraqis can't just walk here? Don't they have more right to live here than anyone in El Salvador? I would say, yeah, absolutely.
Sure, if Iraqi immigrants want to come in, then yeah, sure, yeah. There's an ocean, but yeah, they can't walk. They would like drown.
Let them in too.
But it's not fair because they can't walk here.
Saagar,
see, he's like, so according to your logic, Iraqi citizens should be able to come here. Is that what you want? And Krystal Ball is like, yeah. And he's like, well, it can't happen anyway.
We do have special programs for, I think Iraqis, but definitely Afghan interpreters as well, who helped us in our war.
Helped
so
us.
absolutely,
that's the clarity. But not every random Iraqi who happened to live in the country between 2003 and 2020.
Why not? Yeah, why not? I mean, they come here to work, don't they? Like they can't just show up and not work, so they don't even get welfare if they're undocumented, right? So like, work, yeah.
It's not a fair process that just because you can walk across Mexico, or if you're some Chinese or Haitian or whatever, that Somali or whatever, you can afford a ticket to there, that puts you ahead of the line. And
it's not fair to let people walk to America because it's unfair to people who can't walk. What the f is Blood waffling about? This is why, like, in his, like, this would all make so much more sense if he could just make racial arguments, but instead he has to like desperately cobble together anything, just like pathetically, well, it's unfair to people where there's water, there's not a bridge to Iraq,
And the reason that these are all men is because it is based upon a belief that you can come here, you can Western Union your money back, and most of these countries, just so people know, huge portions of their economy come from illegal labor. And
they're called remittances, and yeah, oftentimes men who are not given to take care of the children and who are expected to be able to find work easier make the journey up here, and then they save a portion of their wages to send them back to their family. It's called traditionalism. Thank you.
Union transfers from the United States. They're called remittances. There was a huge effort in the Trump years to try and tax remittances, which of course the Republicans quashed, but it's secondary.
Yeah, you should. What? An extra tax because you're sending money out of the country? What insane horseshit is that? Do you know how dangerous that would be to trade? You want to do a second tax on income because it crosses borders? How would you even do? That's already the case at a systemic level, right? But like, if you're just sending it over, like you don't get an extra tax placed on your on your money that you send to a person in a different country, right?
For the conversation right now, my only point is that it has to be orderly. I think we agree. But on the net benefit, I totally disagree that a bunch of people who cannot even speak English, the vast majority of these people, some of them don't even speak Spanish.
Listen,
I think a lot of people don't understand.
This may become...
Yeah, they would speak Portuguese then? Wait, is he implying that they're like they don't speak any language at all? What is he implying by that? Is that they have no language? Actually, a lot speak indigenous languages. Okay, then they speak. Okay, then like what? Like they speak a language? I don't understand.
Controversial on the left. Like, I don't actually have a problem with part of the citizenship process being a requirement to speak English. So make that a requirement. I mean, that's the thing is you can't say.
But that's citizenship. I'm talking about living here.
But you can't say you have to follow the process but then there is no process to follow, and be like, also, I'm going to make sure that there is no process to.
Yeah, excellent point from Krystal Ball here, by the way, that this guy is simultaneously saying, follow the process, you got to follow the law, but he's also trying to make the process non-existent. He's like, I will get rid of all immigration. But if you want to immigrate, then you should follow the law. What law? You don't want there to be any way to immigrate, so why are you pretending that you care about the process of immigration? You're just as opposed to the process being done legitimately as you are to undocumented immigration. You want them both gone.
To follow. I just, I think that's fundamentally unfair. And, the other thing is, like, there's this assumption that everyone in the world would come to the United States of America if they could. Would. And that's just not borne out by the data. Even among, there's a lot of focus on the like Central and South American migrants who come here. There's far more Venezuelans who have migrated to neighboring countries to Venezuela than there are who have attempted.
Yeah, this is like when people in Europe spent all of 2015 and 16 pretending that the Syrian refugees were like flooding into Europe, when in reality, the vast majority of them were being taken by like Turkey. Like Turkey took in millions of Syrians, and some of the Western European countries took in like 10 to 100,000, like a relatively low number, and they were acting like it was the end of the world. And then of course, like nothing happened, crime didn't go up, like everything was fine, but they were racist, so.
Attempted to come here. People typically, they want to, if they're under pressure, first of all, most people don't want to leave their homes. And I think anyone out there could relate to like, you like where you live, you have a certain level of comfort, like you want to stay in your home. So already, if you're like, I have to migrate, this is a pretty...
Also, fun fact, even in Turkey, the immigrants are a net benefit to the economy. Is there a study on that? Syrian refugee effect on Turkish economy. I find it difficult to imagine that anything in Turkey could be good, like economically speaking, Also, I am generally quite in favor of immigration, but taking in millions of refugees basically overnight is always going to be very, very difficult. A lot of the Syrian refugees also weren't even given work permits to begin with, which kind of feels like you're guaranteeing that they become an economic burden. I'm not going to look up research right in the fly, but I'll look into
extraordinary circumstance. Then most people, the overwhelming majority of migrants, are looking to go to the countries that are most proximate, where, again, they may have family ties or it just may feel more comfortable for them or whatever. So it's not true that if you, open things up, that literally everyone in the world would want to come here. That's just not the way it works. Well, so, to your point about like, oh, it's not fair that Iraqis can't come, like, okay, so let's get them plane tickets.
Right, but they can't.
Yeah, but fucking based ass Krystal Ball, man. Jesus Christ. Yeah, exactly, Arsa Carva. I don't think that any country should allow literally infinite immigration, because while population growth is a good thing for an economy, unrestricted population growth past a certain point is detrimental, right? Much in the same way that, obviously you need the infrastructure to be able to handle it. Right now, America can handle the immigrants we're getting. We know that. Like, it's not destroying our economy. Our economy is still exploding up. It's still going up. So that's just not an issue here. I wouldn't accept us taking in like 10 million immigrants a year or something, because maybe that would be significant enough that it would be an issue.
My point. And look, Gallup survey 2021, 900 million people would migrate to the West if they could. Sorry, that's just not going to happen. And this is the same thing whenever it comes to asylum.
I'm not arguing that we should just like let an unlimited number in. I just think the focus only on restrictionism. And here's the other thing that I'll say is there's this assumption that the more cruel and restrictive you are at the border, number one, the more orderly it's going to be. That's not true, because almost definitely the more that you're squeezing the number of actual...
Vaush, he only has a platform to spew Nazi particles because of Krystal. Actually, it's the opposite way around. Saagar has relatively more clout than Krystal. This is Krystal being given a platform. This channel is largely far right, so her presence here is more of a mediating force than the opposite, where Saagar would be like the corrupting force. Does he? Yeah, oh yeah, he does. You realize Saagar was actually considered as one of the potential debate moderators back in 2020 for the presidency. He was considered between Biden and Trump to be one of the people the RNC would choose to mediate the debate. He has more clout than you guys think.
Actual legal migrants, the more you're going to have illegal migrants, because these are not people who are like casually leaving their homes. They have, real reasons and are not going to be and haven't shown any deterrent.
Krystal is the liberal that gets owned. I don't really think she does that. I don't think this is like one of those hackneyed Fox News bits where the liberal just gets meekly overrun. I think that, look, I have disagreed with Krystal Ball plenty, but I try to make sure they're like justified criticisms. And so far here, I think she's just been killing it. So I don't really have much else to say, right? That's the,
based on the cruelty at the border or the restrictionist policies at the border. I'll give you a perfect example. After Trump instituted the child separation policy, with these dramatically cruel images, I mean, some of the most like cruel imagery you could possibly imagine coming out, the number of migrants actually went up. There has been no evidence that the more you crack down at the border, that it actually serves as a deterrent effect and people don't come. That simply has not worked out in history. So even if your goal is like, let's keep people away, the restrictionist direction isn't effective for that.
The counter to that is that the reason they started coming back is because Trump caved and he actually went away from family separation. And he basically reverted back to the original policy. The one time it worked was during the pandemic when we didn't know.
That's complete bullshit, I'm pretty sure. There might be some relationship. First of all, Saagar just defending kidnapping children from parents here. Like, remember how his policy here is supposed to be, I don't want any net immigration? If that was the case, then all he should be saying here is, yeah, I don't think it's good to have them here, but instead he's defending every cruel thing we could possibly do to or say about those immigrants, including kidnapping their children for no reason. He is literally describing the child separation policy as beneficial as a deterrent. Remember that the Trump administration framed it as a safety thing to make sure those kids were really the kids of the migrants coming over, but he's being straightforward with it. He's being open. He's saying, no, it was just torture. We were just doing torture to deter people, Hell yeah. Let's do away with the lie that this was about protecting children. It was to terrify them. We were torturing children, kidnapping them from their families, as an example for punitive as a punitive measure. Anyway, the idea that meaningfully deterred immigration, I just don't think that holds up. There were tons of immigrants coming in under Trump too, right? Like, there are other circumstances at play here.
Allow people to cross illegally, period. And you have to stay in Mexico, which I support that policy. But
that didn't mean that people weren't coming. It just meant that they were being dealt with at a different point.
Yeah, and that's great.
And the Remain in Mexico policy I have some issues with, but the general principle of we should have structures and bureaucracy in place so that the whole of the issue isn't being dealt with at the border, I do think actually makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. There's actually was a Trump policy at the time, which Biden did away with, which encouraged people to apply for asylum in their home country at the U.S. Embassy if they wanted to. Unfortunately, that policy was done.
Let's just apply our brains for a second. You're fleeing a country because it's rife with danger and you fear for your safety, or things are, the opportunities are terrible, blah, 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 okay? So your solution is, what if you go to the U.S. Embassy and file there, and then sit and wait in that country for 15 years while the threat that you're trying to flee continues to persist or gets worse? Because the processing time for migrancy is incredibly long, I am in imminent threat and danger of the negative circumstances present. I will file a report and then wait 20 years to get a no back, And by the way, for a fact that demons like Saagar would show that as evidence that they're not actually a threat. He would point to that and go, see, if they were really migrants, then they would have fled the country. You think they're really a threat when they're just sitting there dealing with it? Like, it's an unwinnable situation. In both directions, he would say it's bad. Remember, he wants net zero immigration here.
Done away with, which I don't support.
There was also a Biden policy that would use this CBP One app or something like that would allow people to apply in their home countries, which also was incredibly effective and which Republicans have, one of the things that they're citing as a problem here is that it would enable that program to continue.
I am not saying the Republicans have been perfect on this issue. In fact, they've been complicit and in many cases have abetted this because it's good for big business. In terms of the wage theory. And
the economy at large. This was a talking point I had to deal with with a lot back in 2019, 2020, back when Trumpsters pretended to have economic positions, was they would do this faux populist thing of pretending that the only people who benefit from immigration are big business and not the entire country. That was a big point with Carl, I was about to say Carl Sagan, not Carl Sagan, Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, where he would be like, you, a socialist, want to benefit big business by letting immigrants in, And then I'd say, yes, and I think those immigrants should be paid the same wages as everyone else, thus making the benefits broader. And then he'd be like, but wouldn't big business benefit from the workers being here at all? And then you'd say, well, the same would be the case for people just having more births because they're just workers. Like, obviously, business does benefit from the presence of workers. That's kind of how businesses work. But it didn't go anywhere because, he's thick.
So that's what I would say. I am not a Republican stand here. I'm purely representing the interests, I guess, of Mr. Saagar and Jetty. From my, again, I think philosophical difference is that I think mass illegal migration is bad. I think mass migration net is also bad for the United States. The foreign-born population is far too high. We need a long period of assimilation and of a strong social safety net policy. And I firmly believe that overall, that this type of...
Why, though? There's no why. Literally, there's no why. He just straightforwardly. It's just like, why? Well, why? Why do you want this? Well, because the philosophical difference he's referring to here is racism. That's the difference.
Of unmitigated control and all that actually does a great disservice to people like my family and others who came to the country legally, and it is an unfair policy.
See, again, this is bullshit because he wants to reduce all immigration to zero. So this whole you shouldn't promote undocumented immigration because it's a disgrace to legal immigrants. He doesn't want legal immigration either. He's not doing it like a civility, like legal distinction between the two groups. He wants it all gone. It's bullshit.
You had the ability to.
Yeah.
And your family had the money
to. That's right.
And
yes.
that's
not unfair.
How is that fair? How is that fair that because you had the resources to do it and you happen to be from a country where there was a possibility of getting in, that you're able to?
Well, how the f is that not fair? Wait, earlier he's like, it's not fair that people from Iraq can't walk to America. And now he's like, but actually it's perfectly fair that my parents got to get in because they got in like before this arbitrary zero immigration deadline I'm proposing for no reason. And also that they had the money to facilitate the travel. That's totally fair. That's a normal, but there not being a land bridge from Iraq, that's the unfair part.
First of all, nobody owes anybody. So in terms of policy, it makes sense that you probably want people who are higher skilled, who already speak English, and who are well educated, so they can more firmly and easily fit into the overall economy.
See, I don't really
that's number
accept
one.
that.
Well, but that's a difference. And then I don't think anybody has a right to come here.
So
and in fact, my net is that nobody has a right to come here.
Here's what I would say.
Yeah.
I do think mass illegal migration is a problem.
Yes.
Not knowing who's coming in, having chaos at the border, having people who are being paid under the table, and who could, because they're working in the shadows, that can depress wages, no doubt. That is for sure an issue. Having a, significant level.
Honestly, I want her to ask him, why don't we deport you? Yeah, what would his answer to that have to be? He's literally a second generation immigrant from India. She could be like, well, so then don't you think that America would have better dealt with this cultural incongruity by doing this policy earlier? Wouldn't it be better for you to leave? And he'd be like, well, no, I think the net zero thing could start now. My parents got in before. It's like, oh, well, if you really want national congruity, why should we let immigrants in now? Why shouldn't we just retroactively kick them out if we're looking for national unity? Why? His argument doesn't defend himself because there is no argument, because it doesn't make any sense, because the answer is racism and that's it. That's literally it. Again, I know it's tiring for me to repeat it over and over and over and over and over again. But that's it. That is the reason. It's that simple. It's this meme. It's this meme. Literally every fucking time, dude. This is how I feel about Canadian racists, all like Steven Crowder and shits like that,
Of legal migration where people have a path where you can put the requirement, okay, they have to speak English or whatever. I think that is net and throughout history has shown to be net beneficial to America. I think it's a core part of why America has been as, economically successful and as vibrant and thriving and innovative as it has been throughout history. So I just, and there isn't evidence that legal immigrants negatively impact wages for anyone, as I said before. So as a population, they tend to be overall more law-abiding. That's what the numbers show. Tend to be some of the hardest working people in the entire country. And actually, you know, oftentimes tend to have a lot of conservative values that Republicans are excited to, you know, crow about and try to win over when it's convenient for them politically.
No question. You're right. I think immigration has obviously been a net positive to America. Wouldn't be here without it.
What?
Yeah.
Throughout the past. But I would also, again, I would say that periods of great migration were also followed by periods of great shutdowns. And I think there was deep wisdom.
No. No, not at all. The only shutdown, the only decrease in proportional immigration rates would have been like in the post-World War II period up till like the 1960s. Like it's just, there's one little thing. Like it's no, the data doesn't support that. This is completely different from his previous argument. Yeah, I wonder, it really makes me wonder if there's some kind of like hidden underlying belief that he has that is actually the best explainer of his policies that isn't being explicitly laid out here for one reason or another.
In that, because it allowed for assimilation, it allowed for the benefit of that industrialization before we had overall changes to our laws, the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1960.
He's obviously a communist, Nutters. True.
Which by and large has not changed, and I think dramatically should change. We currently have a chain migration-based system where if you happen to have a relative here, it's easier to migrate, which is nuts because it also should be merit-based, which is what I support.
I don't think that's nuts. I think it makes sense that if you have, I mean, this is again like a tradition in America, is if, you know, people who are in your family come and then they sort of set up and then you have a support system that
just
you can
come
and tie into.
Mean it's good.
But I think, to me, it makes some
sense.
But
he can't demonstrate how it's bad apart from him just gesturing at it.
Sure. I mean, look, it has its proponents. That's why it's been the law of the land for the last 50 years. What I would say is I think we should move like Australia, Canada, and many other Western developed countries to a dramatically merit-based immigration system with a point-based in terms of the criteria that we've talked about, being able to speak English, et cetera. But that belies the fact that...
But our economy is better than any of those countries. Why should we, the United States of America, the most powerful nation on earth, adjust our immigration policy so that we can become like the inferior countries that are weaker than us? Why would we do that? Why? Why would we do that?
It's not going to be fair. It's not fair because immigration shouldn't be fair. Not everybody should have an equal right to immigrate or go anywhere. And I don't. It
shouldn't. Wait. Earlier he was complaining that the system wasn't fair because Mexicans had a land link to the U.S. and now he's saying he doesn't want. What is he? Oh my dude. It's like he hasn't even practiced the fake arguments, you know?
An equal right to set foot in any country. Whenever I go through passport control, any country in the world can deny me if they want to. I don't care. I don't have a problem with that.
But Saagar, you know the reality.
Go to Poland or whatever.
You know the reality is because we are relatively well off and American, we pretty much can go wherever we want.
Mostly,
we pretty much can go whatever we want. So what you're advocating for is a policy where basically like rich people can come and poor people can't. And I, you know, even outside of the fairness, I don't actually think that is the ideal migration system because, again, I think it's classist. I think it ignores this
Saagar and Jetty's weak, virginal, faux populism when confronted by Krystal Ball's Chad sincere populism, you know?
Skills and the abilities that, you know, people who happen to...
Krystal Ball's official position is that we should build a land bridge from America to Iraq because it's not fair that poor people get to walk up here from El Salvador, but they can't from Iraq. That's the Krystal Ball platform. Krystal Ball 2028. We're going to build a land bridge, okay? We're going to build a goddamn... It's going to cut the entire Atlantic in half horizontally. Right through it. And all of the poor, dispossessed... Oh, what did I just hit? Whatever. All the poor, dispossessed Iraqi people, they're going to walk across that land bridge. And who's going to pay for it? The rich! The 1%! For too long, the 1% have been able to enjoy the benefits of their mega yachts and of their cruises, while the 99% have had to wait for the occasional cold season that allows land bridge to form. Now, under my administration, we will build land bridges at a high enough level, above sea level, that people will be able to walk across them even when it is very hot outside.
Again, I think it's classist. I think it ignores the skills and the abilities that, you know, people who happen to have been born in the wrong country and to the wrong set of parents that they can bring to the table. And I think that's demonstrated by the strength of America through migration throughout our history.
My care for the poor and the lower class extends to the borders of the United States.
We love our faux populist allies to the poor, don't we, folks? We love fascist insincerity when they pretend to care about the plight of the poor. We love it, don't we? We love it, don't we, folks?
For everybody beyond that, I hope for the best for you, but it's not my problem. And that can sound harsh if you want, but I've seen enough of the world to know that there is so much suffering that is out there that there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. My parents are from India. I feel no obligation to street urchins in India. I think that's the Indian government's problem.
It really is incredible how with people like this, once you bat aside their feeble attempts at justifying what they believe, their actual underlying belief is that they're just evil. Like that's actually, like once they run out of pretext, the follow through, the thing they arrive at is just like, actually, they literally just starts talking like Disney villains, you know? Just like, no, I don't care about the poor urchins and I don't care. My concern for people is gone. Like just, it's hysterical, you know, and it's completely unjustifiable, but like that's the logic of fascism. The fascism will excuse anything in the name of nationalism because fascism is worship of the state, the existing one or a hypothetical future one when fascists are in control.
I think it's really sad. I've seen a lot of them, you know, in horrible sanitary conditions, but I believe that
Crystal Ball is literally just thinking like, is there a way for me to diplomatically call him evil?
Number is so vast and so grand that there's a certain hubris to the extent that we can think that we can extend those rights and benefits to everybody.
And that's where you and I are just fundamentally different.
Because also keep in mind, immigration benefits the United States. This isn't even a matter of being charitable to other countries. Another thing I think we should do, we all live on one world, we're all citizens of that world, but immigration benefits us. Net zero immigration would be disastrous for our economy. He wants to hurt Americans too, in the service of racism.
The fact that we can't solve every problem for every person in the world does not harden my heart to being able to do what we can within the bounds of things that, again, are actually good for our country and have been shown to be good for our country over time. And the last thing I'll just go back to, it doesn't make any sense to me that when New Yorkers are fleeing to Texas, oh my God, this is terrible for New York. But when migrants who, again, over time, law-abiding, more law-abiding than the native-born population, hardworking, have gone through hell in order to get here, are going to probably be way more patriotic than your average American. But when they come, suddenly it's a disaster and it's terrible for the state. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, public opinion doesn't agree with you. I can at least say that.
I don't know about that. I think
what? Public opinion says we should do net zero immigrant. What? What retort is that? Is it over? I think it's over.
There are a lot of Americans who are very committed to the basic concept of America as a nation of immigrants who, you know, I mean, this is, again, Biden ran on this last time around and he won the presidency. And I think it's foolish for him to completely abandon the more inclusive messaging, not, you know, any sort of radical open borders thing, but to the more inclusive messaging, values-based messaging that helped him win the White House. I think it's a dramatic political mistake.
We'll see. We've been going for an hour, I believe. So if people want to leave a comment and let us know.
What do the comments have to say about this? Krystal's comparison between internal and external migration is so stupid it hurts. Nice counter argument. I don't usually reject or dislike Krystal outright, but the two sentences to her talking about a spin, she's horrible. Pretty far on the restriction side of things. 5K a day is 1.8 million a year. 1.8 million immigrants a year, even if they were all fully documented, would only be 0.5 percentage point of our population per year. We could probably do 1 percentage point per year and be fine. That's probably good. Even 2%, you know, depending on the infrastructure. I think Saagar has a point. He himself is proof that immigration brings bad things here. Yeah, Saagar's high IQ strategy was to actually get left-leaning people on board with getting rid of all immigration by making himself so detestable that they pivot to that in like a last-ditch effort, you know? Yeah, Krystal did really well there. I'm glad. I don't really particularly enjoy like seeing anything from Crystal Ball and getting all angry about it. You know, I like believing that there are good people and good things out there. Yeah. Look, just as a final summary to points here, the problem with mass undocumented immigration is a logistical, bureaucratic one. Having a lot of immigrants coming in is a good thing. It's a good thing. It benefits our country. Empirically, economically, it does. Mass undocumented immigration has issues largely tied to the fact that they just shouldn't be undocumented, you know? It also makes undocumented workers much easier victims of crime because they're disincentivized from going to the police. It makes them easier to traffic. It makes them easier to get into crime because they don't have as many legitimate opportunities in this country. It's just silly. They should be given a path to, you know, to at the very least, leaving aside path to citizenship, at the very least, they should be made proper immigrants, not undocumented. They should be given their documentation, you know?